Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Kryptonians return from infinity. Chapter 21. Mjolnir hummed and trembled, leaning forward but unable to move. Neither the terrifying weight of Mjolnir itself nor the flashing lightning on it played any role. It was like a common hammer, easily held by another palm, besides the holder. And just a few seconds later, the space where the palm was located began to tear, and the long and narrow cracks continued to spread in the space-like veins drawn on paper. Then, in the horrified sight of everyone, a tall man appeared. In this way, he walked out of this weird crack. Yes, it's him. Not far away, Phil Coulson, who has been completely reduced to a melon-eating audience, stared at the figure in the crack in surprise, not daring to blink for a second. Although we haven't actually met each other yet, Phil Coulson has seen the photos and information about this figure 8 times a day for the past month, and he recognizes the ashes. That's right, it was none other than KO who had previously wrestled with the Supreme Mage Ancient One in the mirror dimension. At this moment, KO seems to have changed significantly from before. The whole person seems to have grown up a few years suddenly, and his figure has been raised again. At the same time, most of the clothes on his body were destroyed, and the angular muscles of the upper body were clearly visible, making the intern Daisy beside Jane drooling. The reason why KO has such a strange change is because he has fought fiercely with Ancient One in the mirror dimension for more than 30,000 hours. Converted into years, it is nearly 4 years. And this is the power of Time Gem, one of the 6 infinite gems. In fact, due to the limitation of her own strength, the Ancient One of this world made her use of Time Gem extremely superficial, and it is not an exaggeration to say that she was reckless. But ability is not good enough. Ancient One knew that he couldn't control the full power of Time Gem, so he spent most of his life working hard, but only trained the time cycle skill to the full level, and the effect was quite good. This way, whenever KO seriously wounds or kills him, Ancient One will use the Time Gem in a nasty way, and everything will return to square one. Very rogue style of play. This kind of feeling is like RMB players playing boss in the game, opening up Wasteland and running the whole process, and the resurrection brush flies. In this way, KO can be regarded as experiencing Dormammu's feelings when facing Doctor Strange. It's not that our side is weak, but the other side is shameless. But fortunately, KO is not completely without advantages. Because of the barrier of the light of the mind, the power of Time Gem cannot act on KO's body, which causes his power to grow continuously over time. The potential of the Kryptonian is so powerful. Even without sufficient energy to nourish the fixed star, his strength is still rising at a speed visible to the naked eye after the regulation and optimization of the 4th order KO gene lock. Even later, the space of the mirror dimension could no longer imprison KO, but he still stayed here, using the power of Time Gem as a whetstone to improve himself. As for the boringness of falling into infinite reincarnation. Just kidding, as a former reincarnation, it's not like he hasn't seen similar tricks before. For example, horror cruise ship, different dimension killing array, and so on. For KO who has already broken through the demon robbery, it is no different from a strategy game. But changing to Ancient One is different. She has not yet advanced to level single universe. Even if she survives for a while with her superb magic attainments, she cannot support her forever. Facing KO who is getting stronger and stronger, she can only continuously experience the feeling of death, in shorter and shorter time intervals, gradually losing her own will, and falling into a state similar to thinking Twilight. While playing with time, time will play with you, and this is the price of abusing the power of Time Gem. In this way, this seemingly never-ending battle lasted for about 4 years. Ancient One, who was on the verge of collapse, finally discovered that the power of the Time Gem not only failed to trap KO, but also made him stronger. Ancient One, unable to hold on any longer, had no choice but to sigh helplessly, and use the last resort to escape from KO's entanglement in embarrassment. Meanwhile, less than a day has passed in the real world. This weight really lives up to its reputation. With a chuckle, KO relied on unparalleled brute force to forcibly bring the square hammer in front of him, and his hand holding the handle of the hammer was already surrounded by blazing gold flames. Gold's energy surged and churned, like a raging flood that was about to break a bank, hitting the power hub of Mjolnir, which was sealed by infinite divine power, a fixed star core that was about to be annihilated again and again. Slightly squinting his eyes, invisible spiritual light turned into breeze, raindrops, and silk threads, penetrating into Mjolnir's interior bit by bit. In KO's spiritual vision, under the indestructible metal shell, it seems to be surrounded by a huge and inexhaustible flame sun. The overwhelming scorching fire is shining brightly, and different forms of pure energy are intertwined in it, mixed with various natural elements. Mixed to form a stable and firm composition. Interesting. Feeling the majestic energy transmitted from the core of this fixed star, KO couldn't help but a strange look flashed in his eyes. You, put Mjolnir down. Although Valkyrie Sif was shocked by KO's appearance like everyone else, he still reacted when he saw Mjolnir struggling in his hands. The woman's intuition told her that Mjolnir was likely to save the dead Tower. KO turned around and seemed to have just realized the surrounding situation. He looked down at the blonde man lying on the ground, the corners of his mouth were slightly curved, and just about to speak, he found an astonishing wave of energy coming from in front of him. It is the Destroyer. What happened? On the throne of Asgard, Loki stared dumbfoundedly at the Destroyer who was ready to go in the magic mirror, and the reindeer crown was filled with question marks. Oops. On the other side, Sif and the others also noticed the change behind them, and they immediately looked horrified, and hurriedly picked up Tuor's corpse, and fled in a hurry. As for KO, he looked at the opposite side with an interested face. The Silver Titan, which gathered destructive energy, appeared in front of it in a short while, and swept towards the thick calf comparable to the Green Titan. Boom! Amidst a palpitating muffled sound, the steel body that had made Sif and the others helpless was easily broken by KO's kick at this moment. And the manipulator of the Destroyer didn't seem to have expected the other party to have such terrifying power, so he let him fall to the ground carelessly. Buzz buzz. However, at this moment, the huge silver armor repeated its old tricks. The silver metal body rolled rapidly like flowing water, and the visor that had fallen to the ground was reversed to the rear again. The next moment, a blazing energy ray shot out, piercing KO who seemed unprepared. Boom! The rioting land was like 100 beasts galloping, and the entire town of Puentean seemed to be roaring and shaking. Sif, Jane and the others stared blankly at the front where the thick smoke rose, with only the word bewildered left on their expressions. A few minutes later, the smoke gradually dissipated, and I saw a deep pit with a diameter of more than 10 meters impressively, with cobweb-like cracks spreading, as if it would collapse at any time. And at the center of the deep pit, there are two figures looming. What kind of monster is this guy? The eyesight of the three warriors Sif and Asgard far surpassed that of the people on Earth, and they quickly saw the situation in the deep pit clearly. At the moment, the image of the Destroyer has completely changed. The originally ferocious and burly silver body seemed to have been crushed countless times by several heavy-duty rollers, and it was distorted horribly. On the opposite side of it, the young man with a naked upper body was suppressing the Destroyer's remnant body, pressing its faceplate with a slap. During the trembling, the golden red rays overflowed from the fingers of the palm, and rushed in all directions crazily, but were firmly confined within a narrow range by some kind of powerful force field. The armor that is blessed with the power of the gods and legendary. That's it. There was a contemptuous smile on the corner of KO's mouth, and then he clasped his fingers tightly on the big face of the Destroyer, struggling to lift his chin up and separate it from his neck. Immediately afterwards, he raised the Mjolnir held in his right hand and swung it hard at its head. Rumble. Above the clouds, one after another thunderbolts streaked across, the silver electric lights stirred up the strong wind, and the surging thunderbolts made the sky and the earth change color. No, it's impossible, impossible. On the side of Asgard, everyone was shocked, and Mjolnir actually recognized other people. Could it be that Thor really can't come back? However, when everyone was thinking wildly, KO suddenly found that the hammer in his hand vibrated more violently. At the same time, in Mjolnir's core, a majestic will was transmitted, and it seemed to be fiercely competing with KO for the ownership of the hammer. Outsiders, put down Mjolnir, the artifact of Asgard, and don't allow outsiders to desecrate it. In the spiritual world, majestic voices came from all directions, turning into billowing coercion, trying to shake KO's spiritual will. At the same time, in Asgard at the other end of the universe, a pair of vicissitudes and wise eyes slowly opened, piercing through the barriers of time and space, and an illusory figure projected from the distant star field, in KO's mind condensed into a white-haired old man wearing golden armor and a golden helmet. Perched on the shoulders of the old man were two divine crows, which respectively symbolized thought and wisdom, holding the famous gun, Gingnur, and a cold light shone in the only one eye. After seeing this scene, Ko raised his thick eyebrows slightly. Although he has never encountered this person head-on in the world of reincarnation before, it is not difficult to judge the identity of the other party from this unique outfit. There is no doubt that this majestic and mysterious old man is Thor's father, the Lord of the Nine Realms, and the King of God's domain in legendary Odin. Thinking in this way, the perception ability of the light of the soul in his body has quietly spread, and soon he felt a boundless and majestic divine power like the sky, rolling towards him. Unlike the Kryptonians who need the energy of the young fixed star to stimulate the cells in their bodies, the Asgards in the Marvel world are born with a very enviable ability, that is, their divine power is proportional to their age. The longer they live, the more powerful the divine power is. You know, in a certain version of the comics, Thanos, who got the complete infinite gems, once played with the Avengers Alliance in applause, using the power of Time Gem to turn Iron Man into a child, Hulk into an old man, and Hawkeye into the kid, finally, turns Thor into an old man. Thor, who had spent countless hours in an instant and entered the old age, directly exploded with a terrifying strength that almost surpassed the level Godfather, wielding the Meow Hammer and hammered Thanos on the spot. By analogy, Tonger's biological father, Odin, naturally also has this quality. It's a pity that the Asgardians are not the true gods with unlimited life like the celestial gods. Although their divine power is extremely terrifying at their peak, their aging bodies cannot bear this power, and they need to adjust through sleep. Because of this, Odin enters a deep sleep called Odin's sleep every year. This deep sleep can help Odin regulate the vast and disordered divine power in his body and prolong his lifespan. Definitely, these are not the point. The point is that although Odin has entered a deep sleep, he can still use other methods to keep an eye on everything in the outside world. For example, the love and killing between his son Thor and Loki, everything is seen in his eyes. Although the direction of the script deviates slightly from what he expected, the result still satisfies Odin. My own son, whose brain is full of muscles, is finally no longer just a reckless man who only knows how to swing a hammer, but knows the true meaning of friends, comrades in arms, family, and love. Therefore, after seeing that Thor is real and his heart has grown, and he understands his good intentions, Odin relievedly untied the seal on Mjolnir, and prepared to let Thor return to the invincible warrior, the god of thunder. But who would have thought that at this very moment, there would be a guy who jumped out of nowhere and wanted to cut him off halfway, and snatched Mjolnir's control from him? Who can bear this? God King Odin said that the Asgardians could not stand this kind of provocation, and this face must be beaten back. So, he directly interrupted Odin's sleep, reconnected himself with the destroyer, and tried to use his powerful force to teach the other party the lesson he deserved. It's a pity that he seems to have underestimated the power of this young man. The destroyer manipulated from a distance cannot pose any threat to the opponent. In desperation, he had no choice but to connect to Mjolnir again and start a spiritual confrontation. On the other side, Ko just smiled slightly, feeling the spiritual power that was constantly being oppressed. The spiritual projection from across the endless space is not enough to make the former reincarnation pay too much respect. The invisible light of the soul stirs up a frenzied storm in the spiritual world, like an astronomical tide, rumbling through the void. The king of Asgard's will was strongly impacted, and the solid figure was like water waves, rippling with tiny ripples. Odin, who had just woken up from a deep sleep, froze in his heart, as if he hadn't thought that this young man, who looked young, actually possessed such a powerful force that he could confront the level Godfather head-on. Under that not-so-big body, there is a palpitating terrifying aura, as if it is a fiercely burning sun, which will burst out with incomparable light and heat at any time. Your Majesty, I may visit you in Asgard in the near future, but before that, you should take care of your housework first. Ko laughed softly. Under the tempering of the time gem, the light of the mind, which had recovered to the initial level of the fourth level, condensed into a sharp long cone with amazing penetrating power, and suddenly poked at the phantom of the god. In the vast deep space universe, a group of nebula-like matter condenses into crystals, covering an area of huge amounts of the foundation. The azure ocean flows to the edge, turning into a spectacle similar to a waterfall. In the middle of the ocean, the halls and statues stand majestically, with towering mountains in the background. The colorful rainbow runs through the whole country, and being in it is like walking into a fairyland in a fairy tale. Well, in a sense this place can indeed be called a fairyland, but many forces in the universe prefer to call it another name. Asgard. This is the location of Asgard in Norse mythology, whose owner is the king of god Odin, but in the Marvel world, Asgard is only a major force in the universe and the so-called gods are also cosmic people. This Asgard does not belong to any fixed star system, but was moved into the deep space universe by some great power, and became a suspended continent. The unique rune technology and magic jointly gave birth to this magical continent. There is no rotation of the planet, but there is day and night. This is Marvel's Asgard. At the moment, in the bedroom of King Asgard, Odin, who had just woken up, pressed his head and groaned, his already old face instantly pale as paper. Is this the power of people from other worlds? No wonder even Ancient One couldn't stop him. Odin murmured in a low voice, then his eyes narrowed slightly, and he strode out of the dormitory, supporting his weak divine body. Not long after, he walked into Asgard's dormitory, snatched back the spear of eternity from the bewildered eyes of his adopted son Loki, and impatiently summoned Bifrost, intending to bring Thor and his party back to Asgard. No rush. If you don't make a move, Thor will really be completely cold. From the confrontation in the spiritual world just now, Odin already understood that this young man who took away Mjolnir is definitely a strong man who should not be underestimated. It is conservatively estimated that he is at least at the peak level of the sub-celestial father. Now that he forcibly interrupted Odin's sleep, the divine power in his body was in a very disordered state, and a little carelessness would cause serious damage to him that was difficult to recover. In this state, it's fine if it's just abusing food, but if you encounter a strong person of the same level, you can't help but feel a little powerless, and you can't even afford too intense a battle. Because of this, Odin decisively took the seriously injured Thor back to Asgard and stopped the trial. As for Mjolnir, the rich and powerful king of Asgard said that it was just a mere artifact. At worst, he would take out a dead fixed star core from the treasure curry and let Dwarf build another one. He not bad for this little money. Worthy of being the king of one party, you were really decisive in your behavior and handling of things. In the chaotic town, KO watched with slight regret a thick seven-colored beam of light descending from the sky, involving the entire group including Jane Foster who had already been in it, and then disappeared. A scorching mark like a magic circle was left on the ground. Obviously, Odin was afraid that he would do something to his precious son, so he couldn't wait to teleport him away. It has to be said that His Majesty the God King is very accurate in seeing people. In fact, if he hadn't acted too fast, KO might have really kept Thor as a hostage and exchanged some treasures with Asgard. After all, Asgard is rich and powerful, and others have mines. Odin has 9 countries, and the fixed star galaxy where each country is located is included in his territory. Its background is far beyond the imagination of common cosmic forces. Among other things, the collection of Asgard treasure curry, if you pick any one out, they are all peerless treasures that make people jealous, and there are even some artifacts that surpass Mjolnir. Forget it, at least it's not nothing. Looking at the empty flat ground in front of him, KO could only helplessly shake the hammer in his hand and the destroyer armor that had begun to repair itself, preparing to fly away from here. Wait a minute, Mr. Owl. However, just as KO's feet were off the ground and was about to take off for the flight, a dusty middle-aged man in a suit suddenly trod over and called out in a hasty tone. You, Phil Coulson. After seeing the image of the visitor, KO raised his eyebrows unconsciously. Although there is a slight deviation from the image in the film and television drama, the identity of the person can still be guessed from the opponent's hairline that is about to break through the sky. Yes, I'm Phil Coulson. I didn't expect Mr. Owl to know me. Phil Coulson was startled when he heard the mysterious young man call out his name. Don't look at this middle-aged man with a kind face. He usually likes to reveal his name when he has nothing to do, but that's because the people who can get in touch with him are basically people at the level of Iron Man and the high-level military. In fact, as the 8th level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Phil Coulson's identity is very secretive, and ordinary organizations can't even get his photo. But it is such a person, but KO called out his name, how can he not be shocked? Thinking of this, Phil Coulson silently wrote down the information, and prepared to go back and tell his chief. But he didn't expect that next, a sentence that surprised him even more appeared in this young man's mouth again. At the same time, in the depths of Kamar Taj at the far end of the ocean, the embarrassed figure of Ancient One staggered out of the space passage. "Your Majesty, Mage, this is..." In the simple hall, a black man wearing Mage's battle robe stepped forward in surprise and helped the crumbling Ancient One. When he saw the other's face, a look of astonishment suddenly emerged. "Notify all the mysterious mages, including the 3 holy places, to cut off all contact with reality from now on. If they fail to do so, these people will be expelled immediately, and all their memories and abilities about Kamar Taj will be deprived of them." Quote, "Supreme Mage, what the hell is going on? Why would you?" "There's no time to explain, Mordo." Ancient One raised his head. His face, which could not tell his age at first, seemed to have aged decades in an instant, covered with loose folds. "I need you to bring that Dr. Strange here now, the time left is running out." Amidst the sighs, the Supreme Mage, who had guarded the Earth for nearly 500 years, finally passed out, and the time gem on her chest also made a strange humming at this moment. That's all what happened. In S.H.I.E.L.D. Director's office, after listening to Phil Coulson's report, Nick Fury's face sank like water, which made people feel uneasy. Definitely, he usually looks like this, with a stinky face all day long, as if the whole world owes him money, so it's hard to see any changes in his face. "So, you saw the legendary characters from Norse mythology in New Mexico?" Fury knocked on the table, his one eye flashing coldly like a falcon. "I hope these people came to Earth with good intentions. They claimed to be Asgardians, and they came to find the prince who was lost on the Earth, Thor, and the metal hammer that fell in the outskirts of New Mexico was called Mjolnir, a powerful artifact cast by dwarf. At first I heard these words, I thought they were a group of fanatics who loved Norse mythology, but what happened later made me unable to believe it all." Phil Coulson shared his experience in New Mexico. After all, this is the first time that human beings have come into contact with civilized creatures outside the Earth. He dare not miss anything. And Nick Fury also listened very carefully. From the words of his subordinates, he judged that Asgard's civilization process is obviously more advanced than that of Earth. They have mastered the technology of space travel, similar to magical, divine power. That is to say, they didn't have any malicious intentions, but they came to Earth because of the power struggle in Asgard. Like Batman Next Door, the non-chief who suffers from the late stage of persecution paranoia is very skeptical and said that he has always been 10,000% wary of those powerful extraterrestrial races that are still unknown. In the hidden history of S.H.I.E.L.D. being buried, before the African chieftain became the director, the world had encountered secret invasions by 2 alien forces. If the Captain Marvel hadn't been born, the current situation of the Earth might not be as good as it is now. Those doomsday movies describe it better. After experiencing that incident, S.H.I.E.L.D. gained the attention of the national government, and the World Security Council was established, and Nick Fury, who lost one eye in that secret war that no one knew about, also became its top executive personnel. It was not until later that he succeeded Alexander Pierce as director, and gradually expanded this special department. After a period of steady development, it is difficult for even the federal government to restrain it. Definitely, now it seems that this so-called strengthening is just making a wedding dress for others, and the real benefit is Hydra, which is parasitic behind S.H.I.E.L.D. Fortunately, it was not too late for them to find out. It can be understood in this way. Apart from being as arrogant as Tony Stark, they are actually quite easy to talk to. Phil Coulson thought of the 3 warriors of Asgard and Valkyrie Sif, and said in an uncertain tone. In addition, after that Lord Thor was seriously injured by the giant armor named Destroyer, the extraterrestrial flying hammer flew over automatically, as if he wanted to help him, but... Speaking of this, Phil Coulson's tone suddenly paused, his face showing slight hesitation. Just when it was about to touch Thor, that mysterious Mr. Ko-Zo-Al suddenly appeared. Ko-Zo-Al, speak clearly and don't miss a single detail. Nick Fury's eyes were fixed, and he subconsciously glanced at the comics in his hand. A subtle light seemed to flash in the only remaining one eye. During this period of time, although African chieftains were busy with Hydra, they did not relax their investigations on the Ko siblings. SHIELD is originally the most powerful intelligence organization in the United States, and even in the world. Even if there are Hydra undercover agents, there is no water in this aspect of ability. Therefore, on the second morning after the Green Titan incident, all available information about KO, from the 3 generations of his ancestors to the shopping list in the supermarket, was retrieved by the non-chief. It's just that after reading these materials, the African chief's heart became heavier. Without him, it is too common. Apart from being Superman like comic book writers, the life experience of the siblings is no different from that of ordinary American citizens. It can even be said to be mediocre. Young men and women, think together. There is no doubt that this information has either been tampered with by Hydra, or that the siblings have a way to hide from the eyes and ears of S.H.I.E.L.D., so that outsiders cannot find out what is special about them. Compared with the former, Nick Fury thinks that the second possibility is even greater. Thinking of this, the dark face of the African chief became more and more dark and deep. No way, for an agent leader, the most annoying thing is this kind of existence that cannot be grasped and understood, which makes him feel very insecure. Therefore, after hearing KO's name from Phil Coulson's mouth, Nick Fury, who has always been hilarious, will show an abnormal reaction. On the other hand, hearing the question from his boss, Phil Coulson handed the tablet in front of the non-chief as if he had expected it, and conveniently called up the video that he had shot with the tiny camera in the button. The first half of the video screen is exactly what Phil Coulson called the Destroyer, killing all quarters in the town, and the Asgardians fighting with it afterwards. Nick Fury didn't skip over, but watched the whole process with frowns, without saying a word, but from the dull air pressure around him, it can be seen that his mood must not be good. It wasn't until the end of the video that KO appeared as if tearing apart the space, which made his expression change slightly. This kind of ability, Superman in the comics doesn't seem to have shown it. This thought flashed silently in Nick's mind, but at the moment, the young man floating in midair in the video was looking at Phil Coulson as the first-person perspective playfully, and then said something that made him feel can't help feeling stunned words. The list of Hydra, is your non-chief chief satisfied? What the fuck? After hearing this sentence, even the experienced head of S.H.I.E.L.D. couldn't help but swear. After a long time, the guy who anonymously sent the Hydra information turned out to be this guy. No wonder it showed up in his mailbox that night. For a moment, Nick Fury didn't know whether to be angry or laugh. The person who thought he was being monitored had already known all the movements of his own side at some point, and even the undercover agent was notified until he was reminded by the other party. For the king of agents, this is simply embarrassing to the grandma's house. Phil Coulson on the side looked at the furious chief in front of him, and felt a little sad. God knows how shocked he was when he heard this sentence 2 days ago, and now someone can finally understand his feelings. Dee. At this moment, a mobile phone that only accepted private channels rang suddenly, and the number displayed on the phone also made Nick Fury calm down a lot in an instant. After a few seconds of silence, the chief of the non-chief, whose complexion was comparable to that of Haydn, connected the phone with a cold expression, and then said in a cold tone, "Hill agent, I'm in a bad mood today. I hope you can tell me some good news, otherwise, your year-end bonus this year can say goodbye to you." On the other end of the phone, the beautiful agent who wrapped her house like a penguin rolled her eyes slightly, and said angrily, "It seems that my bonus doesn't want to break up with me, sir. In addition, we should have found what you want." Just as he was speaking, Hill turned his gaze to the ice cave behind him. There, a man holding a star shield was sleeping peacefully in a frozen state. On April 3, 2010, the weather was fine. On 9th Avenue in Brooklyn, at the intersection a few neighborhoods away, there is a beautifully decorated coffee shop standing in it. After 2010, even Brooklyn, which has always claimed to be rich in rural flavor, began to develop rapidly. Buildings with high land prices were built around it, forming a large residential area. It has developed into that kind of noisy and prosperous commercial street, but the fronts of the first floors of each building are also beautifully decorated shops, which can barely be regarded as a site where every inch of land is expensive. And the location at the crossroads is one of the best. This coffee shop has only 2 floors, and each floor covers an area of only 300 to 400 square meters. Standing in the middle of the surrounding buildings, it can be regarded as a bit ostentatious. Definitely, perhaps the other way around is more appropriate. But despite this coffee shop does not look rustic. It has been renovated many times in the past few years, and it is already the most beautiful building in the vicinity. In fact, the purpose of opening this coffee shop was not to make money, but the owner bought it on a whim because of his feverish head. Word of the coffee shop's fame spread, and over time it became a favorite hangout in Brooklyn. This morning, at 8:12, two black commercial vehicles parked at the entrance of this cafe. Not long after, a black marinated egg wearing a fur coat stepped out of the car in front, that is, the well-known S.H.I.E.L.D. director, Nick Fury. Definitely, as the leader in charge of the world's largest agent organization, Nick Fury's daily life can be described as a day-to-day life, dealing with the fate of hundreds of people. In words, how can he have the time to spend in such a leisure place? Time. But now, the reason why the African chief came here was because he had agreed to meet with someone here yesterday. And that person is the behind-the-scenes owner of this coffee shop, Ko Zoal. In fact, for this meeting, the non-chief originally resisted a little. As the saying goes, the son of 1,000 gold can't sit down in the court. In the eyes of the king of agents, it is definitely a very stupid thing to meet a person who has no clear position and can easily kill himself without ensuring his own safety. Originally, he wanted to wait until he formed the Avengers and had enough cards before meeting Ko. Unfortunately, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. The New Mexico incident and the discovery in Antarctica made Nick Fury even more restless. And this time, he also brought 3 trusted helpers, namely 8th level agent Phil Coulson, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, and Hawkeye Barton for making up the numbers. These 3 were thoughtfully chosen by Nick Fury. First of all, as the first Aegis agent to formally contact Ko, Phil Coulson had the experience of communicating with Ko. Although it was very short, from the analysis of the content on the video screen, the other party seemed to have a certain liking for him. What's more, Phil Coulson's family originally has a wonderful affinity and excellent eloquence. When necessary, he can make jokes and sing red faces to ease the atmosphere of the conversation. And the accompanying Natasha Romanoff. Due to some unspeakable reasons, the previous neighbor plan has come to an end, and her main purpose of coming here today is to make vases. After all, no matter on any occasion, if there is a pleasing beauty present, men will always subconsciously maintain a gentlemanly demeanor. As for Hawkeye, who originally didn't have much sense of presence, he didn't go into the coffee shop with them. At the moment, he guessed that the cat might be in a corner. To use Archer reasonably, the necessary basis is to give him a proper space. In addition, several heavily armed black-clothed agents did not get out of the car. These people are rare comrades among S.H.I.E.L.D. advanced agents, but Nick Fury knew that the weapons they brought were not very useful at all, so they waited in the car for orders. Because of the early invitation last night, the closed sign of the coffee shop has already been hung, and it is still early, and most of the surrounding shopping malls have not yet opened, so the street at this moment is extraordinarily deserted. Looking at the deserted street outside, Nick Fury, who looked a little tired, finally got out of the car with a sigh, and strode to the door of the coffee shop with 2 subordinates. And just when Phil Coulson was about to knock on the door, a beautiful figure had already pushed open the concealed door, and looked at the 3 people outside the door with great interest. After Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff saw the face of the visitor, they took a step back in a very tacit understanding, and looked at Nick Fury at the same time, indicating that you are the leader and you go first. And in the car behind him, the heavily armed agents also rolled up the windows without loyalty. Nick Fury. Gold's long hair and pretty face are just like those glamorous beauty stars on TV, but the one in front of her is even more outstanding in terms of figure and temperament. However, after seeing this blonde beauty appear, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents headed by Nick Fury tensed up and stood ready, as if seeing some peerless beast. In fact, there is nothing wrong with this statement. Others may not be aware of the horror of the girl in front of them, but within S.H.I.E.L.D., almost everyone knows all the agents above level 6. They have seen this girl in the satellite images with their own eyes, carrying a building easily soaring in the sky of New York, knowing that she looks harmless, but in fact she is a bullshit character who can tear hatred and kick Hulk. Noticing that the 2 confidants took half a step back calmly, Fei Chief's black charcoal face almost turned green with anger, and after secretly cursing, "Mare fake," he had to forcefully put on a smiling face and walked to the blonde. In front of the girl, he said hello, Nice to meet, Ms. Al. I am Nick Fury, Director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I am visiting Mr. Al today. Hello, Director Nick Fury. I have known you for a long time. Ko has often mentioned you to me recently. Carla, who was only wearing a casual suit, looked at the dark bald man, responded with a smile, and then turned her gaze to Natasha Romanoff standing behind him. In an instant, a playful smile appeared in those Zon blue eyes. This lady seems familiar, have we met somewhere? Heh, maybe I'm more popular. Natasha Romanoff forced a smile, but remembered an embarrassing incident half a month ago in her mind. At that time, she had just been urgently transferred back to New York from Germany by Nick Fury, and then she received a new order to go to Brooklyn to act as the new neighbor of the Ko siblings in order to search for information related to them. Definitely, it would be great if Ko, a powerful super ability user, could be captured with her beauty. But unfortunately, this plan died before it started, and the reason was the seemingly weak and harmless girl in front of her. Young girl. The other party didn't know what kind of ability she used, but she saw her identity from the first day she just moved to the next door, and then used physical persuasion to stun Natasha Romanoff, and presto, the burglary charge was sent to the NYPD division. In the end, Phil Coulson, who received the news, came to the rescue and fished her out of the bureau, otherwise she would inevitably enjoy a night in jail. After more than half a month, I thought this unpleasant experience was a thing of the past, but I didn't expect Carla to be so narrow-minded, and even teased her with it alone. Fortunately, Carla did not hold back on this issue. After teasing, she led the three of them into the second floor of the coffee shop. And in the lobby on the second floor, a young man was sitting on a window seat, sipping a latte in his hand, and there were 3 steaming coffee cups on the table in front of him. It seemed that they had known about S.H.I.E.L.D.'s movements for a long time, which made the 3 people present feel very uncomfortable. Nice to meet you, Mr. Al. I'm Nick Fury, Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Compared with the 2 subordinates, Nick Fury was obviously better at nourishing chi. After his eyes flickered slightly, he calmly walked in front of Ko and extended his right hand in a friendly manner. Hello, Director Nick Fury. Ko got up and shook hands with the non-chief, with a light but polite smile on his face. In fact, today is not the first time the two met. Ko often went to S.H.I.E.L.D. after fighting the Green Titan, and met each other several times, but at that time he was in invisibility, a special use of biological force field status, no greeting. Ko didn't mention this matter. People don't let it go, talking about it will only add embarrassment. Phil Coulson in a black suit followed closely with Natasha Romanoff in a tight black combat suit, acting as the left and right guardians of the non-chief chief. The former greeted Ko with a smile, while Natasha Romanoff was concerned about the female Superman next to him. He just nodded politely, not daring to use the slightest ability to seduce. As for Carla, she walked up to Ko, whispered a few words in a low voice, and sat next to him very naturally, consciously playing the role of a vase, although this vase is a bit strong in fighting power. Mr. Al, first of all, on behalf of the United States government, thank you for subduing the Hulk on the streets of Manhattan last time. Without your help, it is hard to imagine what the consequences of those 2 guys will be. The non-chief said solemnly. There is one thing to say, although this guy has a black face and a black heart, but in general his starting point is indeed to protect the people. When the Green Titan Hulk and the Abomination fought on the streets of Manhattan, he was also very anxious, but there was nothing he could do. After all, these 2 big guys are one of the best extraordinary beings on Earth at this stage, and common human weapons can't hurt them at all, especially the former, which can continuously increase energy with anger, and even nuclear bombs may not guarantee that they can be wiped out. Fortunately, the Ko siblings were able to quell the disaster just in time to minimize Manhattan's damage, well, at least in terms of casualties. It's nothing more than a little effort. Ko put down the cup in his hand and said noncommittally. By the way, how is Dr. Banner doing recently? I heard you invited him to be a technical advisor to S.H.I.E.L.D. It is said that, oh, I believe you ghost. With a black face, Nick Fury slandered in his heart, and decided that when he returned, he would let the bunch of trash programmers work overtime overnight, and make S.H.I.E.L.D.'s network impenetrable, so that there would always be people like Stark and Ko coming in and out of it. It made him lose face. It's no wonder that the non-chief feels uncomfortable. You know, Bruce Banner, who is the host of the Green Titan, is the most dangerous person in the SHIELD filing, and has an extremely comprehensive security system. Especially after he was lured into SHIELD by Nick Fury more than a month ago, all personal information about him was encrypted again. Agents above Common Level 6 do not even have the right to know where he is now. But now, KO, an outsider who should have known this information, has revealed it in one word. Before contacting the other party, the information about Hydra was sent to him, which immediately raised the fear in the non-chief's heart again. KO didn't hear the other person's answer for a long time, but KO just smiled indifferently, knowing that this guy's persecution paranoia has occurred again, and he is too lazy to learn from him. Seeing his leader's silence, Phil Coulson changed the topic with great insight. Mr. KO, we are here today mainly to inquire about the previous matters in New Mexico. According to that Thor, Asgard, where he belongs, should it as a powerful alien force, I wonder if you know about this so-called divine domain. KO smiled slightly. From what you said, does this mean that we are aliens? Phil Coulson smiled and said nothing, and Nick Fury on the side didn't speak either, but the expressions on their faces showed what they meant. To be honest, as early as a month ago, when the KO sisters and brothers appeared on the stage, many forces had a lot of speculation about their identities. Some people thought they might be mutants, and some people thought they were the products that popped out of the laboratory like Hulk. But for Nick Fury, who has experienced the Kree and Skrull invasions, the first thing he thought of was aliens. No way, the strength displayed by the KO siblings is too terrifying. Even if they are as strong as the Green Titan, they are just a bad brother in front of them. How can the people on Earth be so arrogant? In addition, in KO's writing, Superman, who is similar to his ability, is an exiled alien, which made African chiefs more certain of their guess. Don't worry, although Asgard is very powerful, it doesn't have any malice towards the Earth. Strictly speaking, the Earth is also part of Asgard's territory. Humans 1,000 years ago often accepted their protection, and Norse mythology also come, so, you don't need to worry about them until the Earth has grown enough to threaten Asgard's rule. Seeing a few people pretending to be stupid, KO didn't deliberately explain his origin, but answered Phil Coulson's question just now. But since Asgard is mentioned, I think you should pay more attention to the space gem, which is what you think of as Tesseract. Don't look at me like this, you should know that I searched your database, otherwise I wouldn't know about Hydra. KO spread his hands, with a meaningful expression on his face. Don't blame me for not reminding you, this thing is a hot potato, and the current Earth is not qualified to hold this level of treasure. I suggest you better get it as soon as possible. It is thrown out of the Earth, otherwise it will lead to disaster, but it is too late to regret it. Quote. Tesseract can bring the world an inexhaustible source of energy that the planet needs, and we won't give up on it. Hearing KO's exhortation, Nick Fury was silent for 2 seconds, but still rejected the proposal. Behind the danger are huge amounts of interests, and the profits are enough to make all the forces on the Earth take risks. Hearing this, KO said noncommittally, it is true that dangers and opportunities coexist, but the dangers behind space gems are far beyond the scope of the Earth. Believe me, wait until those alien forces who covet space gems after discovering it only needs to launch a war to bring the Earth back to the Stone Age, and the Earth can't afford to gamble. The chief of the non-chief is stubborn. How can we know the outcome if we don't take a gamble? Maybe the Earth can win the gamble. What's more, this is also an opportunity to seek wealth and wealth. With its power, we humans may be able to leap into the universe, advanced civilization in the. Hee. KO was immediately happy, as if he didn't expect that Haitantu in front of him had such a cute side. He shook his head silently in his heart. As the saying goes, only those who are ignorant can be fearless. People on Earth who sit in a well and look at the sky can't realize the gap between themselves and powerful alien civilizations. Perhaps only when they really face it, they will understand that giving up is a virtue. And at that time, it is also the opportunity for KO to harvest this treasure. Yep, KO wants the space gem too, or rather, all the infinite gems. I believe that most friends who understand the setting of the Marvel Universe know that in this extraordinary world of Luli, there are many magical things that can make people reach the sky in one step. And infinite gems is one of the best, and so far, the most likely treasure to help KO go further. As I said before, when KO was still serving in the main god space, his strength had already broken through to the 4th level intermediate of the gene lock. That is to detect the demons, awakening the true self, and the embodied light of the soul has also obtained the attribute of one of the 4 elements of earth, matter, fire, energy, wind, space, water, time. With such strength, even in the main God's space where the strong are like clouds, they can occupy a seat, and they will not be treated as consumables, and the main God will forcefully eliminate them with the power of obliteration at any time. Now, if KO wants to go further, there are only 2 ways to go. The first path is the same as in the 4th level of common, to complete the self step by step, to achieve a certain, small consummation, in the state of mind, and then drive the metamorphosis of the soul and body, and step into the 4th level smoothly. But in this way, except for an additional attribute of the light of the soul, he is basically no different from other level single universes. Even with the blessing of Kryptonian power, his strength cannot be as good as it is now. This produces an overwhelming advantage over the same level. As for the other way, it is to complete the 4 attributes of the light of the mind while completing the self, and then use the balance and resonance of these 4 elements to break through the limit of the 4th order gene lock in one fell swoop. Directly in Legendary, the mysterious realm called Lin Shang was reached. The so-called Lin Shang, although it is also a 4th order high in essence, it is a very special rank in the genetic income system. Its combat power is exaggerated. Order of Saints. Converted into the worldview of the Marvel Universe, that is the strongest of the multi-universe level. Obviously, the difficulty and danger of this road are completely incomparable to the first road. If you are not careful, you will fall into the abyss, and you will never turn over. Because of this, KO takes huge amounts of interest in these infinite gems. Infinite gems are divided into 6 distinct attributes: time, space, power, mind, reality, and soul. Each gem contains the source of law beyond the level single universe. If he can hold them all in his hands, KO can use the 2 gems of mind and soul to restore the light of the mind that he had cut off, and return to the peak state of the past. Then use the origin of the 4 gems of reality, earth, strength, fire, time, wind, and space, water, to complete all the attributes of the light of the soul at one time, and perfectly promote to the 4th level and even to the saint. However, although these 6 gems play a vital role in the future evolution of KO, when and how to take them should also be paid attention to. In fact, with KO's current strength, even if it really wants to snatch the space gem, the United States government can only offer it with a smile even if it pinches its nose. But KO didn't want to do that. First of all, the Marvel world is very deep, he doesn't want to be the target of public criticism, he needs a hiding space. Second, it is because doing so cannot maximize the benefits. The appearance of Thor means that Asgard's coup has taken place. Although KO intervenes, according to the previous events, the god of mischief will still be expelled by Odin. In this way, it may not be long before the Chidori army will descend on New York. By that time, he can get more than just space gems. Thinking of this, KO stopped persuading him, and his purpose was too obvious if he continued, so he changed his tone and said, "I just kindly remind you that the choice is in your hands, as long as it doesn't disturb my peaceful life. However, in the end, I still have to say, since this gemstone is so powerful, why did its previous owner, Odin, abandon it and throw it on the earth? Even if the Red Skull once snatched it, and developed energy weapons, it would turn a blind eye. Isn't Asgard jealous of infinite energy?" KO's gaze is full of helplessness and sympathy, implying that the earth has long been used as a shield by Odin. Nick Fury was silent, and the duo of attendants who were watching the whole process were also silent one after another, bowing their heads and lost in thought. As for Carla, she had already turned her head out of the window when KO was talking about Asgard, so that the 3 people opposite her could not see her blank expression. What Asgard? What space gem? I have never heard of it. As a descendant of Kryptonian scientists, Carla, although not a well-read book, still has some understanding of many forces in the universe, but she has never heard of things like Asgard and space gems. It seems that KO seems to have kept a lot of things from me. Zon Blue's eyes narrowed slightly, flashing a dangerous light. But even so, she did not try to dismantle KO. After all, she is her own man, and she cannot lose his face in the face of outsiders. As for the problem in my heart, I can only postpone the torture until a dark and stormy night. Well, it's not bad tonight. On the other side, compared to the simple-minded Carla, the Aegis trio on the opposite side is much more complicated. Although KO didn't speak very clearly just now, as the world's top agent, how could Nick Fury and others fail to understand the meaning of his words? From KO's mouth, I learned that Asgard is definitely a very powerful cosmic force, but even so, their master god King Odin still dare not keep the Tesseract by his side, but threw it to the earth, which is still in the age of ignorance. The deep meaning in this is simply frightening to think about. It's okay for the African chief, because it's too dark to see too many emotions, but the faces of the other two showed serious and worried expressions. Natasha Romanoff hesitated to speak, and finally whispered, "Head, I think." Nick Fury raised his hand to prevent Natasha Romanoff from continuing, glanced at the two confidants, and then said to KO, "The development of Tesseract is just to increase the power of self-protection for the Earth. More and more cosmic forces are appearing on the Earth. We can't sit still." When he said this, his eyes were fixed on KO, as if he meant something. KO smiled and said nothing, just picked up the coffee cup in front of him, and said to Nick Fury, "That's all for now, you can figure it out for yourself. Ask what you should ask, no matter how much I have to say, I have nothing to say." Quote. The implication is to see off guests, but Nick Fury has a thick skin and finally made up his mind to meet KO. How could he leave like this before getting tangible benefits? What's more, another purpose of his trip has not been achieved yet. "Mr. KO, this visit to you, in addition to wanting to know about Asgard, we also want to ask you to save a person." "Save people?" KO raised his eyebrows, looking at Nick Fury in confusion. Nick Fury looked serious, with a hint of anticipation in his eyes. As a cartoonist, I believe that Mr. KO should have heard of Captain America, the hero of World War II. Captain America, Steve Rogers. For this superhero holding a star shield, I believe that all friends who have watched Marvel movies and comics should not be unfamiliar. It is true that in terms of combat power alone, Captain America is not outstanding among the many superheroes, and is even often dubbed by the majority of netizens as a combat unit in Marvel. However, his indomitable spirit and will are beyond common sense. Even a reincarnated person like KO, who has traveled all over the world, looks at him differently. What makes him special is not his strength, but his kind nature and noble character, which other heroes do not have. To make an inappropriate analogy, if Captain America was born 2,000 years earlier and hanged on a cross to be tortured, my buddy, maybe the captain will have to move his position. But for such a great person, his life experience is extremely sad. Let's not talk about the things before becoming a big-breasted brother. We finally defeated our old enemy Red Skull, but we fell asleep for 70 years and missed a date. Added a little green light. This popular story tells us, you must set the alarm clock before going to bed, otherwise you miss the appointment, and your girlfriend may give you a hat in a rage. And the most interesting thing is that, according to the plot of the Avengers Alliance 4 movie, it is not other people who gave Steve this hat, but himself. Definitely, perhaps because of KO, the butterfly, the plot of this world has changed. At least as far as he knows, there is no so-called old version of Captain America on this earth, and even though Peggy Carter had been in love several times after Captain America's death, she never got married. Until now, there is only one niece left among her relatives. Well, that is the beautiful agent who later flirted with Captain America. Thinking about it this way, Captain America is not too disadvantaged. Although he missed his ex-girlfriend who was in love with him, but he still has a beautiful niece who comes to the door automatically, which is a blessing in misfortune. Closer to home. After hearing the words of the African chief, the doubts on KO's face became more and more intense. Recently, he has been busy studying the secrets of Mjolnir and the destroyer armor, but he hasn't paid much attention to the outside world, so he doesn't know that Captain America has been dug out from the North Pole by S.H.I.E.L.D. Thinking this way, KO directly asked the artificial intelligence, Luna, to call up the latest file records of S.H.I.E.L.D. through telepathy, and after 2 seconds, he finally understood the ins and outs of the matter. So that's it, you don't even have the complete thawing technology yet. KO suddenly realized, and then looked at the few people opposite him speechlessly. To be honest, before he became a reincarnation, KO didn't think there was any problem when he saw the captain frozen in ice for 70 years in the movie, but after he mastered some common medical knowledge, he realized that this plot is too ridiculous. You must know that the captain was thawed after being frozen for 70 years, which is similar to the concept of human cryonics technology. The core of this technology is to refrigerate the human body at low temperature, and revive and treat it after thawing through advanced medical technology in the future. It sounds fine, but it is impossible. If the human body is frozen, it will become a lump of frozen meat, similar to frozen pork in a slaughterhouse. But if there is no complete means of unfreezing, then please do not freeze it all the time, because the unfreezing picture is very unsuitable for children. The reason is that human cells are in the interstitial fluid, and during the process of changing from liquid to solid ice, nanoscale fine ice filaments will be produced at the critical point. Once thawed directly, these ice filaments will pierce the cell membrane and outer cell wall structure, resulting in, when the cells thaw, they dehydrate, shrivel, and die, turning into a hideous mess. The real human cryonics technology is a very complex project, and it is still in the stage of clinical trials on KO's home planet Earth. Many people who underwent this experiment underwent whole body blood extraction before being frozen into the liquid nitrogen ice-sealed cabin to replace the low-temperature resistant cell fluid and monitor it in real time. But even so, their survival rate after thawing is very low, not to mention that Captain America was only crudely frozen in the Arctic ice, sealed. After hearing all kinds of uncertain statements from these experts, Nick Fury did not dare to unfreeze Steve easily, for fear that he would ruin the life of this American hero because of his own mistake, and it would be a heinous crime at that time. In desperation, the non-chief thought of the KO brothers and sisters who were suspected of being aliens. According to the description of the Kryptonians in the comics, this is obviously a higher civilization far surpassing the Earth. If it is them, they may be 100% sure bring Captain America back to life. After figuring out the reason behind this, KO couldn't help but look at the expectant black bald head in front of him speechlessly, feeling that there were too many flaws and there was nowhere to complain. Thinking about it now, the captain in the original plot was able to be so alive and kicking. It was really thanks to the blessing of the protagonist Halo. If it were someone else, even if he didn't freeze to death, he would probably die at the hands of the experts under the non-chief. I have roughly understood what you said. No problem, I can help you rescue that Mr. Captain. After thinking for a few seconds, KO didn't give and directly gave a positive answer to the African chief. Ah, thank you very much, Mr. Al. Nick Fury was taken aback when he heard the words. He thought he would have to pay a small price, but he was already prepared to bleed heavily. But he didn't expect that the other party agreed to the request so easily, without even asking for any conditions, which made him, who was naturally vigilant, couldn't help but have more associations. Don't worry, it's not as complicated as you think. Seeing Nick Fury's feigned suspicion, KO smiled slightly ironically. Although I'm not really a hero, it doesn't stop me from respecting such a person, especially a true hero like Captain America. A hero should not be reduced to a tragedy. Steve Rogers had a long, seemingly endless dream. In that dream world, he defeated Hydra headed by Red Skull, ended the war, and became the hero of the United States. And Peggy also agreed to his invitation to dance, and soon after, he married him and lived a happy life. In this way, the two of them lived a sweet and warm life in this world without gunpowder and war, carefree and growing old together, until a warm current came and turned this wonderful dream. It broke up with a bang. The long darkness began to dissipate, the body gradually became conscious from the cold, and the heart that hadn't beat for 70 years also began to move. Immediately afterwards, the brain, internal organs, nerves, blood vessels, countless tissues and organs began to wake up one after another, and soon exuded vigorous vitality. The eyelids moved slightly, and the thin eyelids seemed to carry a heaviness that didn't match its size, and when Steve Rogers opened his eyes hazily, what he saw was an environment that made him feel extraordinarily bewildered. It's not a flight deck, nor is it some imaginary hell or heaven. Beneath him was a very comfortable bed, with a snow-white ceiling above his head, and surrounded by a large pile of medical equipment that made him feel familiar but unfamiliar. You're awake. While he was wondering, a young voice suddenly sounded in his ear, which made Steve's hairs explode instantly. In just a few minutes, the body injected with super serum has regained some strength, and there are no sequelae such as body stiffness and muscle weakness caused by being in a low-temperature environment for a long time. And this also made Steve jump out of the bed almost instinctively, then squatted on the ground, looking vigilantly at the source of the sound. It was a black-haired man in strange clothes, young, in his early 20s at most. His figure is tall and straight and well-proportioned, and his facial features are also rare and handsome, which makes people feel good at first glance. Definitely, for Captain America who has experienced the war years, the mere appearance can't affect his judgment, but it makes his mind more vigilant. At the moment, Captain America, who had fully awakened, looked at the young man in front of him with great vigilance. Without saying a word, his muscles tensed and entered a state of alert. His peripheral vision scanned the entire room again, and finally stopped at the shield at the young man's feet superior. Steve's last memory is that he sank into the ice field in an out-of-control fighter plane, and woke up in a hospital, with high-technology content, and based on the familiar tingling sensation on his elbow, he was sure that someone had extracted his blood before. Blood. All this made the captain feel like he was facing an enemy. He thought he was still on the battlefield and might be captured by the enemy. It's just that the enemy's head is not very good. He is neither restrained nor guarded by soldiers with guns. The only living thing that can be seen looks like a good-looking little boy. The most important thing is that his shield main body is right in front of his eyes, and he can get it by turning over. This discovery made Steve couldn't help raising his eyebrows. It's not that he is bragging. As long as he has a shield, even if he is trapped in the base camp of Hydra, he is confident in killing him 7 times and 7 times out. Relax, Captain, I'm not your enemy. Ko curled his lips. As a former reincarnation, he can definitely understand the contempt in the captain's eyes, but thinking that he doesn't need to be angry with a single position of combat power, he can't help but kindly remind him, and I advise you not to be impulsive, will get hurt. Coincidentally, this sentence is exactly what I want to tell you. Steve said coldly, and then strode forward, reaching out and grabbing Ko at a speed that common people couldn't react, as if he wanted to subdue him directly. However, just as Steve's palm was about to touch Ko, a seemingly slender white hand grabbed his wrist, immobilizing him. That hand was very beautiful, with 5 long and slender fingers with well-defined joints, very thin fingertips, neatly trimmed nails, and blue veins under the fair skin like streams. A man who can have this kind of hand is either a pampered young master, or a school nerd or an office clerk. And the above-mentioned people, in Steve's eyes, are all classified as the 5 scum of war who have no power to restrain the chicken. But it was such a hand of the standard fighting 5 scumbags that made Steve, a super soldier, unable to resist. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break free. What the hell? Steve was shocked in his heart, but his tenacious will did not allow him to give up struggling, so in the next second, he stretched out his free other hand and pressed it on Ko's shoulder, then raised his head and slammed it hard on Ko's forehead. Boom. Chapter 31. Holly. Shirt. Is this guy's head made of vibranium? That was the only feeling Steve had after using the rocket head on Ko. Intense pain whizzed by, and the dizzy Steve fell down on the cold floor very sadly. His eyes seemed to be circles, and they kept spinning, almost losing his will. Fortunately, the recovery ability of Super Serum is pretty good. It took only a dozen seconds for Steve to recover from the dizziness, and then endured the pain to get up from the ground, even ignoring the shield that was close at hand. Hastily rolled and retreated to the door of this convalescent room, far away from Ko, as if avoiding some scourge. Captain, you. Looking at Steve who was like a frightened bird, Ko showed a helpless look on his face. He took a step forward and was about to speak when he saw Steve kick open the door behind him and ran out without looking back. In a few seconds, a series of exclamations came from outside. This is really. According to Ko's supervision's observation, Steve has already run out of the medical building built by S.H.I.E.L.D. at this moment, and then went on a rampage in the Trident building. On the ground, the scene became chaotic for a while. Forget it, let Fei Chief handle the rest by himself. After seeing these pictures, Ko couldn't help shaking his head and laughing. He came here today just to help Captain America wake up, and to get familiar with him by the way. After all, in the future, both he and Carla will inevitably have some intersection with Avengers. But who would have thought that what should have been a very friendly meeting would develop into such a funny situation? If I had known this, it would be better for the non-chief to set up a studio to fool Captain America. Thinking of this, KO bent down helplessly, and picked up a silver and white cooler at the foot of the bed, which contained the blood that had just been drawn from Steve's body. Super serum has an extraordinary meaning in the Marvel world. Many superheroes and supervillains were born because of it, the most famous of which is Captain America and the Green Titan Hulk, who was beaten up by him a few months ago. It is also because of this that after KO thawed for Captain America, he had the idea of studying this thing. If he can crack the mystery, it may help his evolution. After finishing all this, KO didn't stay any longer, and walked leisurely, and left the Trident building in the eyes of a group of agents who didn't know whether it was SHIELD or Hydra. At the same time, in the corridors of the Trident building, there were bursts of fighting sounds one after another. Several black-clothed agents were knocked out like kites, with such force that they knocked a piece of bulletproof glass out of cracks. Seeing this, Steve Rogers didn't dare to delay, and continued running all the way. The Trident building, an environment full of modern atmosphere, made Steve suddenly feel panicked, even more panicked than the setback under KO's hands. As a soldier, he is not afraid of the battlefield and powerful enemies, but this unknown environment can hardly make him feel at ease. He just wants to leave this strange place that makes him feel uneasy, and see what kind of changes have taken place outside, and where he is in this world now. This process is not easy. There are many people wearing black suits or tactical body armor along the way, trying to block him, but the power of super soldiers facing the common people is no different from going into the herd. Without using guns, no one can stop his way. This discovery restored the confidence of Steve, who had been defeated by KO before, and then used force without any scruples, rushing out of the Trident building. In the sky at the moment, light rain was falling, casting a faint shadow over the SHIELD headquarters, which looked like a military base. Steve looked at everything in front of him in bewilderment, staggering back and forth, turning his body, trying to find the familiar world in his memory as much as possible, but it was still a strange place. And in such a short time, more armed agents came after hearing the news. They raised their guns and aimed at Steve, surrounding him in the middle. Facing these dark gun muzzles, Steve, without a shield in his hand, finally gave up resistance, silently waiting for the unknown trial. And at this moment, a loud voice sounded behind him. "Take it easy, soldier." Steve Rogers turned around and saw a black-skinned man in a long black suit with a bald head and one eye walking towards him. Beside him, there was a middle-aged man with a tall hairline, with a slight expression on his face. Looking at him with excitement. "Listen, it's a bit sudden, but I still have to tell you something." Nick Fury stood in front of Steve, looked at Captain America, who was flustered but finally calmed down, and said helplessly, "Honestly, the original plan was to let you slowly accept these things." "Accept what?" Steve asked softly, a sense of uneasiness creeping up inside him. Nick Fury paused. He looked at the captain seriously, and said sincerely, "You have been sleeping, Captain, you have been sleeping for nearly 70 years. Hearing this, Steve's mind went blank for a moment, and after a few seconds he started to look around again. This time he finally understood why he felt that the world was a little weird. No, what is strange is not the world, but him who has been sleeping. "Captain, are you okay?" Nick Fury on the side, after discovering Steve's anomaly, couldn't help soothing him carefully. "Nothing, just." Steve looked at everything around him in a daze, and finally said slowly, "I think I may have missed a date." A week later, on the White House lawn, the government's sudden press conference was about to begin. The journalists who were invited here found that most of the people were wearing medals. Veterans in World War II military uniforms were old if they were not veterans. Up to now, they still don't know what the theme of the press conference is. They just know that all the major media from various countries have been invited, as if they want to announce 10 to the world. The press conference started on time. The brass band on the stage played the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, and the host came on stage amidst the music. Half a century ago, the Nazi Empire waged an evil war to control the world. At that moment, the heroes of the United States stood up for freedom and justice. He participated in the war for the first time, saved 400 soldiers, helped the Allies win the Battle of Italy, and then participated in many campaigns against the Nazis, including the hellish Normandy landing. As long as he participated in the battle, it ended in victory. He is the symbol of victory. He is the spirit of the United States. The host introduced that when the journalists were perplexed, the old people had excited expressions and clenched their fingers together into fists, and some stood up unconsciously. Now, let's invite America's hero, Captain America, Steve Rogers, to the stage. The news was like the ripples caused by the stones thrown into the lake, and the journalists present instantly boiled up. Unexpectedly, after the Green Titan Hulk and Superman appeared one after another, this great World War II hero would also return to people's vision. No wonder the people invited were all old people, because they had either participated in the European campaign, or grown old watching and listening to this heroic deed. Amidst the passionate music, the main character came on stage, and then there was a loud exclamation. "It's him. Look, he hasn't aged at all, he's still the same as in memory. Captain, I've landed on Omaha Beach with you. He hasn't changed at all, but we are all old." Some old people had tears in their eyes, and some had sad faces. The journalists had no time to pay attention, and all the cameras were aimed at Rogers. Rogers was not unaccustomed to being photographed by non-stop flashing lights. After becoming the real Captain America, he often toured with a group of girls with thighs exposed and sold national debt. At that time, he was more an actor than a soldier. But unfortunately, revisiting star treatment did not make him happy. On the contrary, hearing these old people's words and seeing their old faces made Steve feel a little lost. The people back then are all old today, but I am still the same. Given a choice, Rogers would rather be like them, or simply die in the ice, than wake up 70 years later and face a strange environment and strange people. In the words of 70 years later, he belongs to the past and is an outdated person. The host noticed the change in Rogers and stood up to interrupt. "I know you are very excited. Considering that the captain just woke up from a 70-year slumber and needs more rest, we will not disturb the captain." Rogers didn't say anything, just walked off the stage in silence, not forgetting to look at the old people who were also looking at him. Backstage, Rogers sat alone in a corner, as quiet as a living corpse. Although he had previously promised the African chieftain to return to the eyes of the world, when he actually faced these things, he felt that it was a mistake and he should not come back. "You don't look well, Captain." After hearing this voice, Steve raised his head subconsciously, and then saw Ko, who didn't know when he was sitting beside him. After being slightly surprised, Steve greeted politely. "Hello, Mr. Al, I heard about you from Phil Coulson agent, thank you very much for saving me. Also, just call me Steve, the war is over, I'm no longer a captain." While speaking, Steve's eyes glanced at Ko inadvertently, and a subtle emotion flashed in his eyes. It's been a week or so since he woke up, during which time Nick Fury has arranged for Phil Coulson, a fan of Captain America, to help Steve get acquainted with the new world of the 21st century. And through Phil Coulson's description, Steve also knew Ko's identity. An alien who is suspected to be of the same family as Superman. Steve definitely knows what Superman stands for, and even as a teenager, he used to steal family money with Bucky to buy DC Comics, and he was barely a Superman fan. However, because he became the Captain of the United States, his popularity far surpassed that of Superman, who was only a fictional character, which caused DC Corporation to suffer heavy losses, and soon closed down. It was also because of this that when he looked at the young man next to him who was most likely a relative of Superman, he felt a little weird. "Okay Steve, you can just call me Ko too." Ko shrugged and said in a casual tone, "Actually, you don't have to be so humble. You have always been the captain in the hearts of the people of the United States. Now there is an exhibition hall dedicated to you in the museum in New York, which records that you blocked Germany the deeds of conquering the world. You are a well-deserved hero." After hearing these words, Steve smiled bitterly. "Hero? I don't remember that I was so great. The reason why Hydra and the Nazis failed was because of the unremitting efforts of all people, and it cannot be attributed to one person." Ko shrugged and did not completely deny it. "It is true to say so, but sometimes the world really needs a hero to inspire people, so some people myth you and want to build you into a spirit and belief." Steve was silent. He had been a star for a while, and he knew the routine of the United States government very well. What's more, he was basically considered a dead man at that time. No matter how great a dead faith is, it can only be admired by people, without harming the interests of those in power, but it is not necessarily alive. 70 years ago, when I was rushing to the battlefield, I thought about a question: what should I do if there is peace? I was lucky to have Peggy at the time, so I decided to spend the rest of my life with her after the war. But God made a joke with me, let me sleep for 70 years, and missed her. After a long silence, Steve spoke, but the topic was a bit heavy. From what he has seen and heard these days, he has already roughly understood the changes in this world. There is no doubt that this is an era of informationization and technology. For this world, the so-called Captain America is just an old man. The old guy, except for admiration and publicity, is useless at all. To put it bluntly, he was originally a weapon created for war. Apart from being able to fight a little, he had almost no skills. Steve laughed to himself, a little self-deprecating. Not being able to sleep for 70 years, not only did his friends and lover leave him, but he even had a gap with the world. Just 1 week can't improve Steve's situation at all. His mind is still stuck in 70 years ago, no matter it is cognitive convenience or psychological level, it is out of tune. Even with the help of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's hard to fit in. The former hero is now just a lost bum who has lost his home. Looking at the dejected blonde man in front of him, K.O. couldn't help thinking of a movie called The Shawshank Redemption he had seen in his previous life. This movie tells the story of an old man who has been in prison for 50 years. After he was released from prison, he hanged himself in a small hotel because he could not overcome the fear of reality. Smiling. Steve wasn't that miserable, but he wasn't much better either. Imagine if when you come to awakening, you find that human beings have entered the era of space colonization from pre-nuclear civilization, and all your relatives, friends and people you know have become dust of history. How would you feel like that? How do you feel? In addition, this Steve is very similar to himself when he entered the main God space. The only difference is that he has forgotten the pain for a long time, and he is only just beginning. Thinking of this, K.O. didn't say any more nonsense about sorrow and change, but just patted Steve on the shoulder. Captain, don't be afraid of this era, what you need to do is to find the value of existence. Let's forget it, I don't really want to contact people from the country now. Rogers laughed forcefully. He was created for war. Although the United States today has wars and conflicts with other countries, as far as he knows, these two battlefields were triggered by the United States. They are unjust wars. It's a joke that he participated in representing the spirit of America. No, when he was awake, people from the government often came to persuade him to go to Afghanistan, but he refused. I'm not referring to this, Captain. K.O. smiled slightly, his eyes slightly deep. Believe me, you will soon find that you have not been abandoned by this era. Maybe. As soon as the words were finished, Steve caught a glimpse of Phil Coulson, who walked into the backstage smiling and waving to him from the corner of his eye. There was a trace of apology on his face. I'm sorry, it seems that I have to leave first. It's okay, I live in Brooklyn anyway, you can come to my house for a drink when you are free. Steve smiled bitterly. My metabolism is 6 times that of ordinary people, and I am almost immune to alcohol, so I can't get drunk. Hee. Steve, this universe is huge, some things may not even be able to handle, Superman. K.O. smiled, then got up and walked outside. If you really want to get drunk, you are welcome to come to me anytime. Thanks. Watching the receding figure, Steve whispered. In the endless universe, an extremely huge battleship is silently moving forward. Around it, it seems that there are a large number of small and medium spaceships busily shuttling among them, transporting resources plundered from other planets. The line of sight shifted to the interior, bypassing the layers of armor and protection, and finally came to the center of the battleship. This huge palace occupies almost 1/10 of the file size of the entire space battleship. Supported by dozens of pillars hundreds of meters high, the stone throne stands high at the end, and a huge figure in gold armor is sitting on it, looking coldly at the thin figure kneeling on one knee below, said indifferently, you said. You know the whereabouts of the space gem, Asgardian. He has a majestic figure, and his words are full of irresistible majesty. He has purple tough skin and a giant vertical line on his chin. This tall figure is the famous Death Titan of the eternal family in the universe, the overlord who controls countless cosmic forces, Thanos. Also known as Thanos. Yes, Lord Thanos, the great eternal Titan. The space gem is now on a planet called Earth, and it was Odin who left it there. Under the steps, the former prince of Asgard, Loki completely restrained his cunning side and saluted Thanos respectfully. History is always surprisingly similar. Even if KO intervened, Loki still defected from Asgard, and in order to avoid the gaze of Heimdall, he followed the dark abyss at the root of the World Tree, left the scope of the 9 realms, and drifted in the barren in the star field. The living environment in the outer space of the universe is extremely harsh. Unpredictable radiation storms and energy turbulence have brought Loki to the brink of near death several times. The former noble prince of Asgard is now no different from a down-and-out beggar. The only thing that supports him is the poisonous fire of revenge burning in his heart. Loki, whose self-esteem was severely trampled by Odin, feels that he has been greatly deceived, so he vows to take revenge. And the purple titan in front of him is his best hope for success. As long as he has the support of the overlord of the universe, Loki has the qualifications to compete with Asgard. Asgard, I will return to that place with the most honorable gesture. Loki thought so. Definitely, in order to do this, he must also pay enough attractive chips. Is it really the Earth? Thanos muttered to himself, and there seemed to be a glint in his eyes. Tell me, Asgardian, what do you want? You must have heard of my reputation. As long as you give me a chance, I will definitely be able to dedicate the space gem to you. Loki bowed his head deeply. In exchange, I implore you to grant me a powerful army and help me become the king of the Earth. Can? Thanos nodded, but he laughed at himself in his heart. If there was no future given by that person, he might really agree to Loki's deal. After all, it is just a primitive planet that has not even gone out of its own fixed star system. Even if there are some special features in it, compared with space gems, this abnormality is not worth mentioning. But unfortunately, there is no if in this world. Thinking of this, he suddenly reached out and threw a gorgeous cane in front of Loki. On the surface, this seems to be just a delicate staff, even if it can exude the power of the mind, but it is nothing more than that. There are too many spells that can control the mind in this world, and it is not surprising that there are more spells. But this wand is different. In the plot of the Marvel movie, the above blue spar also hides a cosmic treasure mind gem. As we all know, not everyone can use infinite gems. This is the common sense recognized by those in the universe who know the existence of infinite gems. So in order to carry the space gem, someone built the Tesseract. In order to carry the power gem, the Kree created the cosmic spirit ball. In order to use the time gem, Agamotto created the Eye of Agamotto, using himself as a carrier, and then sacrificed a lot of his own people. And even for a powerful character like Ronan, when using the power gem, it must be inlaid in his weapon. Loki slowly picked up the staff, feeling the power contained in the spar. A confident smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. I will never let you down. I also hope you won't, otherwise, you will definitely regret coming here to find me. Ignoring Loki's slightly ugly face, Thanos raised one hand to prop his chin, and said very calmly, Go, take come space gem, Earth is yours. Yes, bowing his head, not letting the cosmic overlord in front of him see the viciousness and anger in his eyes, Loki exited the hall respectfully. Then impatiently, he walked towards the place in the battleship responsible for space transmission. Innocent and short-sighted kid, it seems Odin really spoiled him. After a long time, Thanos on the throne sneered, and even the striped chin that looked like a purple potato showed more wrinkles. However, after watching it for so long, don't you have anything to say, the guy from the future? Ah, accompanied by Thanos' words, there was a sudden chuckle in the air. The next moment, in the center of the dark palace, there was a small space where the light and shadow were slightly distorted, and then a figure very familiar to Thanos appeared from it. At the same time, in an apartment far away in Brooklyn, New York, The Enduring Friends was played on a 75-inch big screen, accompanied by interesting and funny plots, and canned laughter sounded from time to time. Carla, who only wore a blue shirt, bent her slender white legs and leaned on the sofa. The delicate and healthy blush on her face seemed to be from some strenuous exercise, and she looked very attractive. At this moment, the blonde girl was full of laziness, like a cat curled up, enjoying a leisurely time, lying in her nest, not wanting to move at all. I said, are you really not going to come and help? Wearing a blue apron, KO is busy in the kitchen making a fragrant dish and preparing other ingredients. Sorry, I can't even move a toe now because of someone, and I think you can handle these things. Carla lay on her side, with a playful smile on her face. By the way, don't forget my favorite beef pot stickers and sweet and sour pork. Well, in order to make up for my mistakes, it seems that I have to show some real skills in this big meal tonight. Ko shouted exaggeratedly, and brought the finished saliva chicken to the table by the way. Today is April 30th, 2012, which is a special day for the two. 4 years ago today, the Kryptonian siblings officially became a couple and gave each other their first first time in this life, in this apartment. Therefore, every year since then, no matter how busy the two siblings are, they will find time to spend this day together, which can be regarded as one of the more memorable moments for them. An hour later, Ko brought out the last 2 dishes, and the table was filled with more than a dozen different types of Chinese dishes, exuding a tempting aroma. No way, Ko is better at the hometown cuisine that he has studied painstakingly in his previous life, compared to the unfamiliar Western food. In addition, he has studied in the Chinese Little Master Plane and Luangxing for a period of time, which makes his craftsmanship even better. Carla also fell in love with this extensive and profound Chinese culture, beautification, food. Speaking of which, the black stewed egg seems to be coming more and more frequently recently, always trying to get some Kryptonian technology from me. Ko, don't you really want that space gem? Why? Don't agree to him. Carla sat on the dining table, immediately picked up a pot sticker with chopsticks and bit it in her mouth skillfully. Her eyes immediately showed a look of satisfaction. Don't worry, there are many people who are thinking about that gemstone. It's just right to let S.H.I.E.L.D. stand in front. Moreover, they have accelerated their research on the gemstone recently. I believe that someone will discover its existence later. It's my best chance to make a move. Ko said lightly, with a sense of sight of a big boss behind the scenes. If these remarks are heard by the original female Superman, it is inevitable to stage a drama of killing relatives. But it's a pity that the female Superman in front of her has long been misled by someone. Although there is still kindness and justice in her heart, their status is obviously far behind Ko. Because of this, Ko never hides what he thinks in front of Carla. What's more, he knows Carla's bottom line well, and he will never let this girl who has been with him for nearly 20 years feel uncomfortable unless it is a last resort. Disappointment. Sure enough, after hearing Ko's words, Carla just frowned and stopped worrying about this problem, but began to concentrate on solving the sumptuous dinner in front of her. Ko smiled, and was about to go to the wine cabinet to get a bottle of red wine to add some atmosphere. But at this moment, a weak spatial vibration suddenly came from afar. Ko, who has been keeping an eye out for the past few days, quickly noticed the abnormality and turned to look in the direction of this wave, but his supervision, which penetrated everything, was blocked by a thick layer of lead material, and he found nothing in the end. Not only that, but even the super hearing seemed to be disturbed, and all he heard in that area was an extremely noisy and strange noise. As expected of an African chieftain, he is really meticulous in doing things. Ko sighed inwardly. The Kryptonians' supervision and super hearing seemed powerful, but they were also extremely vulnerable to targeting. For example, supervision cannot see through lead substances. This is the setting of the DC Comics in this world in the early days. Even if Ko abolished it after redrawing, it was still exploited by those who wanted to. Is there anything I need to do? Carla got up from the dining table, looked at her boyfriend with blue eyes, and there was concern in her eyes. Obviously, she, who also has super senses, naturally also noticed this sudden abnormality. It's okay, everything will be fine. Ko comforted Carla with a smile, and didn't want to affect this memorable day because of this little thing. Hopefully, everything will go according to plan. Ko muttered something in a low voice, but he didn't want an unexpected change that was going on quietly in an underground base hundreds of kilometers away. 2 hours later, S.H.I.E.L.D. Dark Matter Energy Institute. The institute covers a vast area and is lined with buildings. Around the experimental building of the institute, there are also radio radars for cosmic observations and gamma-ray intensity calibration. It was late at night, but the buildings of the research institute were brightly lit. The researchers were busy packing their equipment and evacuated with the help of agents and security forces. The pitch-black steel raptor leapt over the mountains and came to this complex of interlaced lights. It was a black gunship, with red lights flashing conspicuously under the whirling propellers. Military off-road and heavy transport vehicles lined the road below it, their headlights piercing the night like lightsabers. Attention all personnel. The evacuation order has been confirmed. Please evacuate immediately in the designated vehicle. Repeat, this is not a drill. The loud and clear evacuation instructions were repeated over and over again through every broadcast in the building complex, and heavily armed soldiers and civilian personnel in suits followed the instructions and carried out the evacuation work in an orderly and rapid manner. Phil Coulson wears sunglasses. With hands folded in front of him, he waited for the helicopter to land in front of the tarmac. The helicopter landed staggeringly in the center of the apron, the hatch opened, and a tall black-haired woman came out first, followed by the stern shield director, Nick Fury, who jumped out of the hatch. How bad is it now? The non-chief, whose face and figure were almost blended into the darkness, straightened his windbreaker, looked at Phil Coulson, who was trotting forward, and asked in a deep voice with an indistinguishable black face. Sir, the worst-case scenario. Phil Coulson took off the black sunglasses on his face with one hand, and said in a helpless tone, because we don't know what happened at all. Hearing this, Nick Fury's face sank, and he led the accompanying Hill agent towards the elevator. The elevator plummeted all the way to the underground laboratory, and Phil Coulson condensed as much as possible during this rush, and reported the situation to his own official, Nick Fury, in as concise a language as possible. Just 4 hours ago, the Tesseract exploded with energy. Why did this happen? What tests did Dr. Banner do? Nick Fury asked with a frown. The project to develop Tesseract is led by him alone, and it is impossible to hide any details or progress from him. No matter what test the participating scientific and technical personnel want to do, they should first report to him and seek his consent. Then he will contact other departments that may be involved in the experiment. As Bruce Banner, who was personally invited by Nick Fury to study the Rubik's Cube, although he has the highest command authority in the experiment, he still has to follow this principle. And because of Hulk, Nick Fury even sent a Barton agent code-named Hawkeye to monitor Banner's every move at all times. No, Dr. Banner didn't do the test, he wasn't there at all. Phil Coulson said seriously, it was an automatic trigger. The Tesseract started by itself. The words of Phil Coulson made Nick Fury and the Maria Hill agent behind him feel a little heavy again. What level is it now? Nick Fury continued to ask. He had to learn more about the situation before meeting Dr. Bruce Banner Selvig and hearing him explain. It's still climbing. According to Dr. Banner's estimate 10 minutes ago, its energy is enough to destroy the entire base. Phil Coulson said helplessly, so we had to order an evacuation. How long will it take for everyone to evacuate? I mean our people. Nick Fury asked, frowning. Since learning the truth of S.H.I.E.L.D. a year ago, African chiefs have been secretly developing their own forces and trying to eliminate Hydra hidden around them. The African chiefs' plan is not complicated. First, make a list of Hydra members within S.H.I.E.L.D., clean up the Trident headquarters as quietly as possible, and then radiate the surrounding areas to clean up the remaining branches one by one. He didn't arrest Pierce and other high-level executives in the first place, and held back only to preserve more of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s vitality after the purge, so as not to disband the organization. But unfortunately, judging from the current situation, it may take a long time for S.H.I.E.L.D. to be completely reborn. There is no way around this. After all, Hydra has grown like a blood-sucking worm in S.H.I.E.L.D. for decades. Nick Fury's purge plan has had little effect without being ready to tear his face, and there are still a large number of Hydra in key positions in S.H.I.E.L.D. For example, in this secret base, although the core members are all self-made people, selected by non-chiefs, in order not to arouse the vigilance of Hydra, he still selected many Hydra to mix into the peripheral and security teams. Phil Coulson looked around, estimated the time in his mind, and replied, the withdrawal should be completed within half an hour. Hurry up. Nick Fury gave Phil Coulson an annoyed look, and Phil Coulson got out immediately after receiving the order to step up the work of urging the evacuation. In addition, Maria Hill, who came with her, was also sent by the African chieftain to transfer the prototype of the second stage of the experiment, that is, in Avengers Alliance 1-inch, S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted to imitate the Hydra developed by Tesseract during World War II, energy weapons. After a while, the elevator descended to the bottom floor of the base, and Nick Fury walked out with some heavily armed agents, and then entered a laboratory with an open space. "What the hell is going on, Dr. Banner?" Nick Fury strode into the laboratory and asked a gentle-looking man with curly hair in a serious tone. Compared with the unlucky guy in the movie who played a traveling doctor in the Middle East to avoid being chased by the military and his father-in-law, the current Bruce Banner can be said to be very smooth, except that his freedom of life has been slightly restricted. His current life is as beautiful and fulfilling as a dream. Definitely, it may be exaggerated to say so, but compared to the days of hiding in Tibet a few years ago, it is really the difference between heaven and hell. The root cause of all this is also due to the Battle of Manhattan a year ago. Due to the strong intrusion of the KO siblings, the Bear Boy Hulk entered a state of autism in advance. No matter how General Ross and other forces tried afterwards, the Green Titan could not be reappeared. It was as if this horrible green monster had been killed by the Kryptonians and completely disappeared from Banner's body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Nick Fury also used the resources at hand to negotiate with various forces, and finally fooled this poor physics genius into S.H.I.E.L.D. and began to study Tesseract for him. Originally, this job should belong to the astronomy expert Dr. Selvig in the movie Thor. But it was also because of KO's intervention that the astronomer, whose mind was not inferior to that of Banner and Iron Man, was taken to Asgard by Bifrost and has not returned yet. Because of this, Nick Fury approached Bruce Banner, who has the deepest research on gamma energy, to take over the job. In addition, after confirming from KO that Hulk has not really disappeared, the non-chiefs also began to plan to trick the opponent into Avengers, and wanted to add a strong combat power to the Vanguard team he imagined. Well, the topic is far away, let's get down to business. At the moment, countless researchers wearing white pendants are successively fiddling with a circular electronic device with a complex structure in the center of the room. And at the core of the device, a blue cube seems to be resonated by the magnetic field it emits. The blue and deep energy flows in it like a stream of water, as if something terrifying is waiting to go out inside. It's hard for me to describe the specific situation to you. In short, you just need to look up and you will understand. Dr. Bruce Banner continued to walk among the surrounding instruments without looking back. Hearing Bruce Banner's words, Nick Fury raised his head subconsciously, and then saw an energy ball with a diameter of 10 meters above his head. This looks like a bit of trouble. It's really not small. Once this energy gets out of control, the research base will basically be scrapped. However, this is not a real trouble. Having said that, Dr. Bruce Banner finally stopped what he was doing, and looked helplessly at the blue cube in front of him. Tesseract is active and not working. After saying this, a researcher next to him seemed to be doing a demonstration. He picked up an iron fiber and touched the Tesseract lightly, and then it was directly blown into a ball of ashes. Have you tried unplugging it? As a scumbag, Nick Fury naturally put forward his own suggestions. In his mind, this is the way to fix disobedient instruments. Pat lightly, clap hard, it is impossible to unplug the power. Mr. Director, cosmic magic is not your TV. It is originally a huge amounts of energy source. The existing technology on the Earth is not enough to control this thing. In fact, it is releasing interference and radiation now. Candide Banner explained to Nick Fury with the corners of his eyes twitching slightly. And radiation. Nick Fury frowned. Don't worry, it's not that harmful, it's just some low-energy gamma rays. Dr. Bruce Banner, who had been covered by a large amount of gamma rays, said calmly. That doesn't sound like much harm. Especially if you were here. Nick Fury's complexion changed, especially the way he looked at Banner was indescribably weird. As an agent, he likes to doubt everything by nature. To put it bluntly, he is starting to doubt Banner now. Thinking of this, he pressed the headset without hesitation, and said, Barton agent, report what happened in the past few days. As soon as the words fell, a short-haired man with a strong figure slid down from a high place with agility along a black rope. Obviously, this is the superhero with the lowest sense of presence in Avengers, Agent Barton, nicknamed Hawkeye. He is a top archer and one of the most trusted agents in Africa. Dr. Banner should be fine. No one has been in or out recently, no external contact, no instant messaging. Barton walked to the machine and looked at the mysterious Rubik's Cube keenly. Even if someone did it, I don't think it's our side. This way. Fury repeated his words. Yeah, don't you guys always say that the Rubik's Cube is the door to the other side of the universe? Barton crossed his arms. Since it's a door, it should be able to open on both sides. As if in response to his words, the originally quiet tesseract suddenly made a strange noise. The faint blue fluid suddenly accelerated, and the high concentration energy quickly dispersed like a cloud of mist. Immediately afterwards, a wave that could not be observed by the naked eye suddenly exploded from the small cube. The entire facility under everyone's feet trembled violently, and the steel bars let out a chilling hum. Banner's expression in front of the display seemed to freeze for a moment. He saw that the values of all the instruments began to soar upwards desperately, breaking through the peak within a few seconds. Get out of here, quick! Bruce Banner, who found something wrong, immediately reminded him loudly, but it was too late. The next moment, the continuously radiated energy formed a fierce vortex on the surface of the Rubik's Cube like an air current, and the blue laser burst out from it, piercing forward like a bunch of swords. The space screamed and was torn open. Blue's energy swept across the room like a transparent tide, and everyone flew out backwards in embarrassment as if they had been hit by a huge wave. After a few seconds, this tide-like energy slowly faded, and the space returned to normal. But at the position pointed by the light beam, a thin figure appeared out of nowhere in everyone's sight. This is a black-haired man in retro clothes, surrounded by a flame-like blue light, holding a gold scepter in his hand, and the top of the scepter is also shining with a light blue light. He raised his head slowly, with a sinister and cruel smile on his face. Asgard's god of trickery, Loki. Obviously, because of KO's intervention, many details of this Marvel world have deviated from those in the movie, but Loki still came at the same moment and in the same way when the general direction was not changed. Earth. Perhaps, this is the self-correcting power of the world line. But things aren't quite the same either. The portal didn't disappear with Loki's appearance, but continued to churn for a while. A few seconds later, two figures, one tall and one short, appeared one after another from behind the chaos, and walked out of the portal slowly. Those were two strange creatures with humanoid shapes. From the appearance, they should be a man and a woman. The woman among them was extremely tall, close to 1.9 meters by visual inspection, with a charming and fit body, holding a spear of unknown material in her hand, and her face was gloomy and rigid. And the other man was a burly titan with animal features, wearing black armor and holding a heavy battle axe in his hand. From his size, he was the kind of Blood Bowl player with high attack and high defense. Titan is a system. These two people are members of Thanos' Dark Order, Proxima Midnight and Black Dwarf. In the story of the movie, the reason why Thanos boldly let Loki go to the Earth alone is that he did not expect that this extremely backward primitive planet would have such a wonderful thing as the Avenger, which can resist the aggression of the Chitauri. But now, for some reason, he already knew part of the future, so naturally he wouldn't let Loki send it up for nothing. Tesseract, or Space Gem, it means a lot to Thanos. It can be said that it is the infinite gems that Thanos wants most so far. After all, the territory of the Marvel Universe is too large. Even if he has mastered the space jump technology, he cannot cross multiple galaxies in a short time. This will undoubtedly increase the difficulty for him to collect infinite gems. But it's different if you have space gems. This can be clearly seen from Thanos in Avengers Alliance 3, who has collected gems before the arrival of the protagonist team. So this time, he not only let the two generals under his seat go out to ensure the safety of the space gem, but also asked for help from the guy who told him the future, so that the other party could help him at a critical moment. Closer to home. As the two stepped out, the portal slowly closed behind them, and Tesseract temporarily regained its composure. They walked up to Loki from left to right and sandwiched him in the middle. At the moment, all the agents here had pointed their guns at them, but the Obsidians would just turn a blind eye. Proxima Midnight cast a sideways glance at Loki. Is this the human organization you were talking about? That's right, it's them. Besides, this planet is not as simple as it seems on the surface, you'd better not take it lightly. Loki's tone was a bit dignified. Although he didn't know the details, but the first glimpse in Odin's urgent action of sending Thor back to Asgard made the god of tricks wary of this backward planet. Psychology. You don't need to worry about that, you are just a pawn responsible for leading the way, don't forget this, Asgardian. Proxima Midnight said coldly. Loki's eyes were dark for a moment, but remembering the existence behind the other party, he finally closed his mouth and remained silent. Take away the Rubik's Cube, don't keep the master waiting. Proxima Midnight seemed to ignore the Aegis agents who surrounded them, and turned to Black Dwarf beside him. The orc man with a height of more than 3 meters responded vaguely, and then he carried the battle axe on his shoulder and walked towards the Rubik's Cube not far away. Stop. Seeing this scene, the non-chief couldn't sit still immediately, and immediately stopped the other party's actions, even with a rare trace of anger in his voice. I have to say that the villains in the Marvel world are all good at pulling hatred. For example, the 3 Loki in front of me have acted as unscrupulously as if they were in their own back garden since their appearance. Now, that strange-looking female alien even directly threatened to take away the Tesseract. Who the hell can bear it? So he took a step forward and pointed a small pistol at several people. Sorry, but I'm afraid we can't let you do this. Proxima Midnight squinted at him, paused for a moment on the small pistol in his hand, and then sneered contemptuously, as if looking at a brat pointing at him with a slingshot. Fire. Realizing that the other party had bad intentions, Nick Fury immediately gave the command to shoot. All the agents in the audience opened fire at the same time, and the ferocious firepower and bullet rain swept towards the target like overwhelming. Seeing this scene, the big stupid Black Dwarf just stood there with his axe in his hand, looked down at these humans, and attacked himself with a toy-like weapon. At the same time, those bullets without any energy bounced off his skin. It wasn't until at the moment that his muscular brain finally realized, what are these people doing? They don't want to attack me with this kind of thing, do they? Boom. When both the enemy and us were stunned at the same time, Proxima Midnight on the side also started to act. I saw that her figure was much taller than ordinary men, as if shifting shape, leaving afterimages in the air, one after another. She used the spear in her hand to sweep away the surrounding agents who hadn't reacted, flew out. There is one thing to say, although in the plot of the Avengers Alliance movie, the strength that Obsidian will show is a bit hip. But in fact, as super warriors selected by Thanos himself and who have conquered countless civilizations, their strength can be ranked at the top even if they look at the entire Marvel universe, definitely, except for Boss. Among them, Proxima Midnight is a top expert who is good at close combat. Not only is he physically strong, his movements are as fast as the wind, and the spear in his hand is an artifact made by Thanos himself. It is said that this sharp gun can emit light that contains the power of death. Once an organic life form without energy protection is touched by it, it will cause serious injury or death. All in all, regardless of the plot of Avengers Alliance 3 whose combat power system has been thrown out of the sky, Proxima Midnight, as the 5th General of Obsidian, has a very good combat power. It is as easy as chopping melons and vegetables simple. Seeing how tough this strange-looking woman was, the agents hurriedly turned their guns, and a dense rain of bullets staggered in the room. But without exception, all were emptied. It is true that with Proxima Midnight's strong physical fitness, the effect of these bullets is almost equivalent to nothing, but just like normal people don't like being bitten by mosquitoes, why should she be foolishly stinged when she can avoid it? Woolen cloth. So in the next minute, the figure of Proxima Midnight flashed around like a phantom, as if appearing in every corner of the room at the same time. The shiny gunfire pierced through one after another afterimages captured by the agent's peripheral vision, but didn't even scratch the corner of her clothes. Dark red blood sprayed like a fountain. Proxima Midnight felt like a black gust of wind at the feet of Proxima Midnight. The spear swept everywhere, and the blood of countless agents spattered on the spot. In addition, Black Dwarf, who was going to take away the Rubik's Cube, also stopped in his tracks, and occasionally smashed the single agent into meat paste with an axe, while Loki, who was watching the play, also held the staff in his hand from time to time. The blue and white energy rays emitted can often blow up several agents together into ashes. In just a few tens of seconds, all the agents in the room were almost dead. Fortunately, the Hydra warrior on the periphery was tricked into blocking the knife by Phil Coulson, who was evacuating his own people, so that the base would not fall instantly. Dr. Banner, now is your time to act. Nick Fury, who escaped by using his racial ability, used the skill of rolling a lazy donkey, slipped to the side of Banner, who was hiding under the experimental table, and said solemnly, "What?" Banner stared wide-eyed, looking at Haitantu in front of him as if he was insane, and it took him a while to understand what he meant. Director Nick Fury, how many times have I told you that I can no longer be a Hulk? This is not an excuse. Since being beaten up by KO last time, Hulk's personality has fallen into a long-term autistic state, and there has been no sign of awakening for more than half a year. Banner was overjoyed and almost returned to a normal life. It is precisely because of this that Nick Fury dared to blatantly recruit him into S.H.I.E.L.D. Otherwise, those guys in the military would not send this mobile, nuclear weapon to their old enemy. I know the doctor, but we need Hulk now. Just as he was talking, Nick Fury saw Hawkeye, who was poked into a lackey by Loki's staff, and his heart that was already hanging was half cold. But I can't change it. Banner wants to cry, but he knows that the situation is urgent, but he really can't do it. It's okay, I'll help you. Aha! Banner was taken aback when he heard the words, and the next moment he saw the chief non-chief grabbing his collar and ruthlessly throwing him from under the experiment table. Holy shit. At any rate, he is also the king of agents who has been injected with strengthening serum. The non-chief's arm strength is naturally stronger than that of many common people. Seeing his standard projection posture, he threw Banner onto the battlefield that had subsided. Banner, who hurriedly got up from the ground, cursed a few words angrily, and secretly swore in his heart that if he could really become a Hulk, he must thank Nick Fury for his kindness in the future. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt as if there was a shadow covering his head, and when he looked up, he saw a big ugly face. Banner. Black Dwarf. _. Seeing that Banner had already confronted the enemy, Nick Fury secretly cheered for the opponent, and then relied on his invisibility ability, secretly picked up the Tesseract and put it in a special box to leave. Slipped away. Don't take it away, I still need it. Loki, who just got a running dog, looked at Nick Fury kindly, but couldn't help but mutter in his heart. Mada, I almost missed it. Is this hidden head full of hidden ability? I don't think there's any need to make this matter worse. Nick Fury, who couldn't slip away, sighed inwardly, planning to play Tai Chi with Loki with a serious face. Definitely necessary. We came to Earth at such a great price, it is for it. Feeling that his side had the upper hand, Loki finally let go of his worries and smiled smugly. Soon, I, Loki, Prince of Asgard, shall be king of this planet. Prince of Asgard. Hearing the other party's claim, the non-chief frowned, and couldn't help but think of KO's evaluation of the Asgardians last time. As far as I know, is there any grudge between Earth and Asgard? You actually know Asgard. Loki raised the corner of his mouth and laughed proudly. You were right, but the problem is that there is no grudge between the ants and the boots. So you want to trample us to death? No, I came here to bring you good news and relief. Freedom is the biggest lie you people on Earth have made up, and I will. Loki was about to give an impromptu speech when Hawkeye cut him off. Boss, if you have anything to say, you can talk about it later. Hawkeye, who seemed to be wearing blue-colored contact lenses, said coldly, Director Nick Fury is stalling for time. After the Tesseract was taken down, the energy here began to riot, and soon we will be crushed under a rock 30 meters away, being buried alive. Yes, Nick Fury quipped, like a mummy in the pyramids. Loki looked slightly annoyed, as if he felt that he was being tricked by ants. He raised his staff and was about to send the non-chief back to the west. But at this moment, a huge amounts of roar interrupted his movements. Hulk, then. How did you survive? The next morning, in the emergency room of S.H.I.E.L.D., KO listened oddly to Nick Fury's account of the night before. At the moment, the chief of the non-chief is not in good condition. There are many serious contusions all over his body, his heart and lung function is damaged, and his right arm is even directly broken. Should be cured. Definitely, these injuries are not the point in KO's eyes, the point is who he was injured by. That's right, it was neither Loki nor the Black and Yao generals who shouldn't have appeared here, but Bruce Banner, who was almost killed by him before. Or, he became Hulk behind him. It turned out that just when Loki was about to attack, Dr. Bruce Banner lived up to the expectations of the non-chiefs. When he was smashed by Black Dwarf with an axe, he finally woke up Hulk, who had been offline for a long time. It's just that it may be because of the long sleep this time, Hulk woke up unexpectedly this time, and he started to throw a mess as soon as he came out, not only fattening the bewildered Black Dwarf and Proxima Midnight after being beaten up, even the underground experimental base was smashed into ruins. The non-chief's injury was caused by the aftermath of Hulk's attack. Fortunately, Dr. Banners will still survived, and Hulk would take him out when the base was about to collapse. Otherwise, the non-chief would have survived this time. Some parts are also permanently missing. Mr. Al, the Tesseract has been taken and we need your help. Because of the injury, Fey Chief's black face turned slightly pale at the moment, but his expression was still serious. Last night, although the three aliens were repelled by the appearance of Hulk, the Tesseract was taken by Loki and used its power to escape from the impending collapse of the base with 3 people including Hawkeye. After listening to Nick Fury's description, KO nodded slightly, not too surprised in his heart. After all, in the Avengers Alliance 4 movie, Loki showed the ability to use space teleportation directly by holding the Tesseract. Obviously, this should be the method Thanos taught him. It's just that this method obviously has certain limitations, otherwise he wouldn't have held the space gem for so long in the Avengers Alliance 1 without directly teleporting away from the Earth. Instead, he would have opened the portal and waited after doing crazy things on the Earth. The Chitauri army came to support. If he could use the space gem to directly teleport between planets, wouldn't he just leave after getting the gem? Even if Loki's purpose is to rule the Earth, after he takes the gem and flies to Thanos, he can still open the portal from the other end and bring the Chitauri army. At that point the Avengers can't even close the portal through the space gem, but really have to fight that big black Chitauri to the death. But now, Loki and others don't do that, probably because they can't. So just like in the Avengers Alliance 1 movie, it is likely that the purpose of Obsidian and Loki is to create an interstellar portal and use the Chitauri army to invade the Earth. Although there is a slight deviation between the beginning and the process, it doesn't seem to have much impact on my plan. To be honest, the appearance of the 2 generals Heiyao was indeed beyond KO's expectation, but considering what he has done on Earth recently, it may be a butterfly effect that caused a slight change in the original plot. So I didn't pay too much attention to it. Anyway, his real goal, Mind Gem, was brought to Earth by Loki, so that the arrangements he had made before could still come in handy. No way, KO doesn't want to go through such troubles, but the 6 infinite gems, including space and soul, have extraordinary significance in the Marvel world. I don't know how many powerful people are secretly coveting, so it's better not to find someone to hide method. Blindly snatching will only ask for trouble. Except for Thanos, this purple sweet potato has the aura of the protagonist and is suspected of being backed by death, so he dares to pursue infinite gems so blatantly. As for KO, who was originally an outsider, he dared not make such a fuss. At least until he recovers to the 4th level, that is, the combat power of the level single universe, KO does not intend to head on with the powerful people in this Fang universe. Therefore, even knowing that the space gem is in the hands of S.H.I.E.L.D., KO still stands still and waits for Loki to lead the Chitauri army to invade the Earth, and then fishes in troubled waters to get the space gem and mind gem together. Seeing KO thinking silently, Nick Fury's heart skipped a beat, and he had an inexplicable bad premonition. Mr. Al, I have a general understanding of what happened. KO raised his head and said to Nick Fury with a sympathetic look, now there is good news and bad news, which one do you want to hear first? Bad news, the non-chief replied without any hesitation. The bad news is that the guy who snatched the space gem came from a very powerful force in the universe. I'm not talking about Asgard. According to my information, that boy Loki has been expelled by God Odin, and what you showed me in the video, the other 2 of them should be the subordinates of Death Titan, Thanos, named Proxima Midnight and Black Dwarf respectively. You don't need to know who Thanos is for the time being. In short, the current Earth can't afford to mess with it. In addition, if it is as expected, after they take away the space gem, they should use it to open a huge amounts of portal and introduce a large number of interstellar troops to the Earth. So, you'd better notify your superiors now and do a good job prepare for full-scale war. If the civilization of the Earth wants to continue and the next generation of human beings will not be enslaved, let's fight hard. After listening to what KO said, Nick Fury felt as if his heart was being held by an invisible palm. He was extremely uncomfortable, and even the standard non-chief black face seemed to have changed his race. Revealed a trace of weak pale. But the King of Agents is the King of Agents after all. After a burst of fear, he quickly recovered his dignified expression, and asked the young man in front of him in a deep voice. And what's the good news? The good news is that those 3 people should still be on the Earth now. As long as they can be intercepted before the space gem is fully activated, the Earth may be spared. As soon as this remark came out, the African chief's spirit was lifted immediately. He sat up straight immediately, and said in a sincere tone, "Mr. Al, the Earth is facing a global disaster, and we cannot afford the price, so you want to ask me for help?" Ko took up the conversation. The non-chief nodded heavily. "Yes. As you said, since the force that snatched Tesseract wants to lead the army to invade the Earth, what we have to do now is to prevent this war from happening as much as possible, and Tesseract is the key." "Good point, but you should go to a professional, not me." Ko shook his head, and didn't promise the non-chief to find Loki's whereabouts. Not only because he needs the other party to bring the Chidori army into the Earth and create enough chaos, but more importantly, he really can't find this guy now. In fact, since the fall of the SHIELD base yesterday, Ko has ordered his artificial intelligence Luna to act secretly to search for traces of Loki and others. However, even after searching all corners of the Earth through various methods such as satellites and surveillance, they still failed to find a trace of them. I have to say that although Loki always loses the chain at critical moments, he is indeed at the level of a master in playing hide-and-seek, with extremely clever methods. It's no wonder that he has been able to make small moves under the noses of Odin and Heimdall for so many years, but he has rarely been noticed by them. In fact, we have tried it, but those aliens seem to have a way to shield most of the gamma rays emitted by the Tesseract, and it is difficult for my group of people to track its location accurately in a short time. The non-chief looked at Ko with a helpless smile, and seemed to be accustomed to this situation. "Where is Bruce Banner? There should be no one on Earth who understands gamma rays better than him. Why would you go so far to find me?" After Dr. Banner turned into Hulk last night, he hasn't changed back yet. It seems that Hulk is a little annoyed because he has been suppressed for too long before. Nick Fury seemed to remember what happened last night, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Although Ms. Betty Ross comforted him, he did not cause too much harm, but there is really no way to find Tesseract for us at present. Sounds reasonable, but so what? Looking at the non-chief who was explaining forcibly in front of him, Ko smiled sarcastically, not to mention that there are still many people on the Earth who have the ability to find the space gem. Throw the space gem out of the Earth, and there will be no such thing as today. Ko simply put a blame on the non-chief, without telling the other party. There is another infinite gems called time on the Earth. Even if there is no such incident, Thanos' army will sooner or later stare at him on Earth. Mr. Al, it's meaningless to say these things now, and I have no right to decide whether Tesseract will stay or not. Fei Chief seemed to remember something unpleasant. His face changed back to black, and he said in a dull tone, "Space gems can continuously extract the energy in the universe. For the Earth, this is the eternal energy source and the key to entering the interstellar era. In the eyes of many people, this is simply the treasure bestowed by God to mankind. Therefore, even though there are countless risks hidden behind it, those politicians and dignitaries are also flocking to it, and even bet on the future of the Earth. What's more, in SHIELD, there are Hydra and other bad guys who are making trouble. Even if the non-chiefs want to throw away this hot potato, they are powerless. It's still the same sentence, these have nothing to do with me." But, before Nick Fury could say anything more, Ko interrupted, with slightly indifferent eyes, "There are not so many buts. First of all, I'm just a warrior, and I don't have much research on gamma rays. I can't do anything about finding space gems. Secondly, I didn't choose to live on Earth to wipe your ass for you humans." The tone of the latter is slightly aggravated, and this is also the first time Ko has admitted his identity as an alien. Nick Fury was silent when he heard the words. After a long time, he raised his head and asked, "Mr. Al, if the alien army really descended on the Earth, would you choose to stand by and watch, or would you help us?" "I will choose to take advantage of the fire," Ko said very seriously. Mr. Al is really humorous." Nick Fury looked slightly embarrassed, thinking that Ko was joking, so he said embarrassingly, "Anyway, you and Ms. Carla have also lived on the Earth for nearly 10 years, it is impossible to have no feelings for it." "Don't talk about feelings, talking about feelings hurts money." Ko crossed his legs angrily, and said with a sneer, as an agent leader, you should understand that a stable cooperative relationship requires the joint efforts of both parties to maintain it. But if you do the math carefully, in the past year, I have made the first move. Stopped the Hulk from destroying Manhattan Street, then provided the information on Hydra, and then helped you wake up Steve. In these 3 things, I didn't return the slightest to you, which can be regarded as showing enough kindness. But now, you've created a planet-level crisis yourself, and you want to use a few high-level empty words to involve me, an outsider, in it. Nick Fury, do you really think I'm the Madonna called Clark in the comics? Quote. Then, what price do you want us to pay before you are willing to help? Hearing the meaning of KO's words, although Nick Fury had a wry smile on his face, he was secretly relieved in his heart. As KO said, blindly giving unilaterally is not only unfair to the giver, but also a great pressure on the beneficiary. Great kindness is like hatred, is not just empty talk. It is true that he still has some hidden cards in his hand, such as the BB machine left to him by Captain Marvel, which can call back the super warrior of level Godfather to protect the Earth. But distant water can't save near fire. Although this BB machine can transmit information across most of the galaxy, what if Captain Marvel is too far away and can't catch up? Maybe when the alien army finishes occupying the Earth, they are still rushing on the way back. Because of this, he begged KO's support so urgently, even if he paid huge amounts of price for it. Honestly speaking, there are not many things on Earth that I can take a fancy to, but as you said, after all, we have lived on this planet for many years, and we have developed some feelings, so I don't care. What kind of request is expected by a strong man? Thank you, Mr. Al, for your understanding, but I don't know what your request is. Nick Fury first thanked him humbly, and then asked tentatively. Don't worry, what I want is actually very simple. In the smile, the corner of KO's mouth gradually raised a meaningful arc. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.